Dracula. A retelling. Jonathan Harker, a young solicitor from England, had been tasked with a new and exciting job, one that would take him far from his home. His employer, Mr. Hawkins, had entrusted him with the important assignment of aiding a foreign client, Count Dracula, in the purchase of an estate in England. The journey from London to Transylvania was one that Jonathan had looked forward to with enthusiasm. It promised to be an adventure in a land of mysterious legends, and he had little reason to suspect that the task before him would change his life forever. As Jonathan made his way eastward through Europe, the landscape grew more unfamiliar. The further he traveled, the more oppressive the air seemed, as if something dark and ancient lay hidden beneath the surface. When he reached Bistritz, a small town nestled at the edge of the Carpathian Mountains, an uneasy feeling began to gnaw at him. At the local inn, the innkeeper's wife, a woman old enough to be Jonathan's grandmother, handed him a crucifix with a tremulous hand. "Take this for your own safety," she urged, her voice thick with anxiety. "The Count is not to be trusted." Jonathan, although a man of reason, couldn't help but feel a shiver at the woman's warning. But he laughed it off, attributing it to local superstitions and the strange, isolated nature of the region. Little did he know that the strange occurrences that followed would not be dismissed so easily. The next day, Jonathan was greeted by a dark, somber carriage and a driver whose eyes were shadowed and unreadable. The road to Count Dracula's castle was narrow, winding, and treacherous. As they ascended higher into the mountains, the air grew colder, and the forest seemed to close in around them. The howling of wolves echoed in the distance, sending a chill down Jonathan's spine. Still, he remained determined to reach his destination. At last, they arrived at Castle Dracula. It was an ancient, imposing fortress perched atop a craggy peak. The stone walls were blackened with age, and a thick mist hung around the base of the castle. When Jonathan entered, he was greeted by Count Dracula, a tall and imposing figure, his features sharp and his gaze intense. The Count's hospitality was formal, yet strange. He spoke in perfect English, but there was something about his demeanor, something off, something unsettling. The Count invited Jonathan into his vast, shadowy home, offering him a room of his own. As Jonathan explored the castle, he could sense an overwhelming coldness. The walls were bare, and the air was still and damp. Over the course of several days, Jonathan's unease grew. The Count was always present, but never quite there. He would disappear at odd hours of the night, and when he did appear, it was always with an air of mystery. Jonathan found the castle's many rooms and hallways labyrinthine, and his growing sense of isolation made him increasingly anxious. He began to realize that he was not free to leave. The heavy iron doors were locked, and the windows could not be opened. He was trapped. One evening, as Jonathan wandered the castle, he came upon a room that had been sealed off, a forbidden chamber. Inside, he encountered 3 beautiful women, their eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger. They stepped toward him with predatory grace, their voices silky and hypnotic. But before they could reach him, Dracula entered the room, his voice a low, angry growl. "He belongs to me," Dracula shouted, his eyes burning with fury. The women hissed and retreated into the shadows, leaving Jonathan trembling in fear. It was then that Jonathan fully understood the terrible truth. Count Dracula was not a man at all. He was a vampire, a creature of the night, cursed with immortality and a thirst for blood. As Jonathan continued to explore the castle in secret, he stumbled upon Dracula's resting place, an open coffin filled with earth. The Count, in a deep, unholy slumber, lay inside. Jonathan's horror deepened as he pieced together the truth. Dracula was not just a vampire. He was a prisoner of his own domain, bound to the ancient castle and its dark powers. Jonathan knew that he had to get away, but the castle was a prison from which there seemed to be no escape. One night, as the Count was away, Jonathan climbed the castle walls, using his ingenuity to break free from the fortress's grip. But the journey to freedom was not easy, and Jonathan found himself lost in the wilds of Transylvania, pursued by Dracula's terrifying influence. Meanwhile, Dracula had set his sights on England. He planned to move across the seas, bringing with him the curse of vampirism. Using his dark powers, he concealed himself in a coffin filled with Transylvanian soil, the key to his survival. He embarked aboard the ship Demeter, which was destined for Whitby, England. During the voyage, strange occurrences began to unfold. Crew members went missing, one by one, and the remaining sailors could only watch in terror as strange, unnatural forces seemed to control the ship. The captain of the Demeter kept a log of the ship's harrowing voyage, documenting the crew's increasingly terrifying experiences. When the ship finally arrived in Whitby, it was found to be empty, the captain's body lashed to the ship's wheel, and a large black dog that appeared to be more wolf than K9. In England, Mina Murray, Jonathan's fiancée, anxiously awaited news of his whereabouts. She had received little word from Jonathan since his departure, and her concerns grew daily. Mina's closest friend, Lucy Westenra, also began to exhibit strange symptoms. She grew weaker and pale, her beauty fading as her health deteriorated. One evening, Mina found Lucy outside, her neck marked with 2 tiny puncture wounds. She looked disoriented, as if in a trance. As Lucy's condition worsened, her fiancé, Arthur Holmwood, sought the help of Dr. John Seward, a former suitor of Lucy's. Dr. Seward, who ran a nearby insane asylum, was perplexed by Lucy's symptoms and sought counsel from an expert, Professor Abraham Van Helsing, a Dutch doctor with a reputation for unconventional methods. Van Helsing quickly diagnosed Lucy as the victim of a vampire, a fact that he struggled to convince the others of, despite his evidence. Van Helsing instructed them to take drastic measures to protect Lucy. He placed garlic flowers around her room and a crucifix around her neck, but Dracula's power was too strong. The vampire continued to visit Lucy each night, draining her of blood. Eventually, Lucy succumbed to the curse of vampirism and became one of the undead, a bloodthirsty creature that terrorized the local children. In the dead of night, Van Helsing, Arthur, and Seward confronted Lucy in her crypt, finding her transformed. Van Helsing explained the need to put her to rest, and with Arthur's help, they drove a wooden stake through Lucy's heart. Her body crumbled to dust, and the peace of her soul was restored. Van Helsing shared the truth of the vampire with the group, explaining that Dracula was still in England, using Mina as his latest victim. The psychic bond that Dracula had established with Mina made her vulnerable, and she began to exhibit signs of the same strange symptoms that had overtaken Lucy. Van Helsing devised a plan to hunt down Dracula and destroy him once and for all. Using Mina's psychic connection to Dracula, the group tracked his movements across England. They located Dracula's lairs, destroying his coffins filled with Transylvanian soil. They found Jonathan, who was in a monastery being cared for, and sent word that they would come for him. Meanwhile, Dracula, he fled back to his homeland, with the group in hot pursuit. The final confrontation took place in Transylvania, in the heart of Dracula's domain, Castle Dracula itself. As the group approached the castle, they were confronted by Dracula's gypsy servants, who tried to protect their master's resting place. In a final bloody confrontation, Jonathan and his friends managed to defeat the gypsies and reach Dracula's coffin. As the sun set on the horizon, Jonathan drove a stake through Dracula's heart, destroying the vampire once and for all. Dracula crumbled to dust, and Mina's curse was lifted. The group returned to England, their ordeal behind them, but each of them forever changed. Quincy Morris, a brave American who had joined them in their hunt, succumbed to his wounds, dying as a hero. Jonathan and Mina, now free from Dracula's grasp, found peace in each other's arms. Van Helsing, reflecting on the battle between good and evil, knew that the darkness that had loomed over their lives was finally gone. But the memory of Dracula's terror would never fade from their minds. The end